I'm John Sipher.
And I'm Jerry O'Shea.
Between us, we have over 60 years of experience as clandestine officers in the CIA, serving in high-risk areas all around the world.
Part of our job was creating conspiracies, like being undercover, to deceive our adversaries.
Now, we're going to use that experience to investigate the conspiracy theories everyone's talking about, as well as some you may not have heard.
Could these be true, or are we being manipulated?
Find out now on Mission Implausible. All right, today's guest is David McCloskey. He's actually a friend and a former colleague, and he is now best known for his best-selling spy novels, Damascus Station, Moscow X, and The Seventh Floor, all worth reading. We'll probably talk about him in the podcast. But he's probably even better known nowadays, especially in England, for his well-regarded podcast, The Rest is Classified, with British security journalist Gordon Carrera.
It's good.
David previously worked at the CIA on issues related to the Middle East and worked in embassies abroad. But he was in the sort of snotty, wimpy side of the agency, unlike right. Jerry and I, who were busy saving the world so that it could be destroyed later on. So, sorry about that.
Can we be friends? Mars and Venus, can DO and DI people? We'll explore that. I'm sorry. Over to you.
There you go. Exactly.
I was trying to translate all the garbage you were writing up in the field, so the people making the decisions in DC would know what the hell you were talking about. Okay.
Well, I have lots of questions, but here's where I'd like to start off with. What is it like now to be making a living off of our exploits?
Well, I like to say, John, that I was certainly not a case officer like you out there saving the world regularly, day by day. But
it is owned by
every day. Yeah.
What better person to actually be able to write down on paper those exploits than an analyst, right? I mean, it's just a continuation of my sort of prior career, right? Now I get to write more fantastical stories and occasionally, poke fun at you guys and some of my analyst friends as well. So it's not too bad. It's not too bad.
Yeah, I have to say as we start that. When I entered the agency, the first couple of tours, I was like the agency version of a hermaphrodite, right? I was between the DI, the intelligence guys, the analysts, intelligence folk, the analysts, and the operations officer, tough guys like John. And both of you, the DI analysts and the DO operators, both of you gave me noogies and swirlies, right?
We looked down on you. Good point.
This is a real besmirching of our reports.
It's a besmirching.
Isn't it? It is. This is terrible.
I think all of us deserve a besmirching, so that's not.
I think true. So. Yeah,
I was trying to go on offense so that my besmirching is a little further down the pike.
That's true. Yeah. No, I mean, I guess, analysts, though, I don't think analysts weren't the type to be given out like noogies and swirlies, Jerry. I mean, I feel like it was very, very much a heads down eating lunch at your desk crowd for the most part, right? Like that's what I remember mostly.
I got like eye rolls and like,
yeah, you got those. Yeah.
And then I'd use a big word and I have to go look it up and realize I'd been besmirched. But
I don't think that's true. You're a king of big words.
We were talking about this before we even hit record, that what Jerry just did is a classic case officer influencing tactic for analysts, which is when you're sitting down in a briefing, the case officers tell you how smart you are and how they don't know anything and how, they're just desperate for your knowledge. And then you as the analyst, even if you kind of know what's happening, you feel good when the briefing starts, right? And it's just a classic. I swear that they taught you that somewhere along the line, because I got it from every case officer I sat down with ever, period.
So I have to get this out. So let me get this out early. We had an analyst, a very senior analyst woman. She came to Manila and we were talking, and around a table, and we were giving a briefing. And at the time, one of the terrorist groups, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, was something we were concerned with, and so the reports officer says, well, there's no way around this, He says it's called the MILF, and everybody smiles around the table except for the analyst, and she's like, yeah, and he's like, well, the MILF, and she's like, so. And she's smart enough to pick up that that's supposed to mean something. He says, well, maybe you should look it up later, but don't use a government computer.
It was abbreviated MILF in
it was,
right?
It was.
That's the name.
Yeah, the MILF. Yeah. Well, good. So we're going down. We're already sort of launching down a path, and conspiracy theories come out of like the CIA. And David, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about maybe some of the tribes inside of CIA, really briefly, and then discuss what the DI, the analysts, do. And then we can sort of talk about conspiracy theories and conspiracies, both within the agency and who gets blamed for conspiracy theories and so forth. So why don't I kick it over to you? I'm sure you've.
Well, yeah, I mean, and the most important tribe is the analysts, because they're the ones writing the stuff that goes to the policymakers, right? And that's what the CIA is there to do for the most part. Occasionally, we'll spin up some covert action stuff, which usually doesn't go that well. But the analysts are sort of, we're holding the flame, I mean, so the analysts are certainly one tribe, right? Your case officer brethren are another.
Operations officers, yeah,
that's right. There's a whole host of like
the S&Tiers and the support guys,
yeah, the support guys. I mean, even within like the DO, right? There's a bunch of different sort of, there's like a sort of hierarchy, right?
The EUR guys are at the top.
How do you see the hierarchy? That's a good one.
How do I see it
in the operations side? Yeah.
Well, I was thinking that there's reports officers, there's CMOs, those are not the same job, right? Those are two different
No, they
things.
They are.
Are they the same? Okay.
So, yeah, they're synonymous.
There's SUs, right? And I always forgot what that stood for. It's
support officers.
Essentially like an analyst in the DO. Is that right?
Desk officers, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sous chefs.
Yes, sous chefs. There were targeting officers, which I guess could be in either the DI or the DO, as I recall. Interestingly enough, the last time I went into Langley, up in the like newly renovated museum, there is a wall that has a list of what seems like every possible job title you could have at the CIA, and it is an entire wall. Have you seen this?
They won't let us in there anymore. just to be clear.
They used to have pictures of me on a horse in Afghanistan. Those are all gone.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
Didn't go real well. Yeah, Afghanistan, by the way. But yeah.
I mean, my perception was always that the case officers believed themselves to be the reason the entire place existed, and thus the most important people there.
Believed,
yes, believed themselves to be the most important. Who else? There was a variety of techie type roles. There were those guys in the green jackets who monitored the contractors who came in, who I always like to include them in any kind of book if I could just randomly throw a reference at them. I don't
yeah, that's right.
Well, you've done a good job with your books. You've thrown in that you had the hot dog machine in one of your books, I think.
Machine in there.
Yeah.
Which,
the hot dog machine, yeah.
Sadly was ripped out at some point in the past decade, probably for like code violations. I try to get a reference to the gift shop in there as much as I can.
The blind man shop.
The blind man stand. Yeah. And I think John, I actually took this line from you with permission, of course, because at one point in some conversation you said that we stopped being a real spy service as soon as the gift shop went in. So, we put that in the mouth of
once you hit baby onesies with the CIA on it.
I know.
That was the end.
So, yeah. but David, so there's the analysts and the operators are the two core tribes, but there's another split, another schism inside of the agency. And I want to know which side you fall on. Are you Dunkin' Donuts or were you Starbucks? There's two places to get coffee.
That's right. You know what? I migrated over the course of my career. I began as a Dunkin' Donuts man.
And once you made more money, you went to Starbucks?
Yeah, exactly. And then once I made GS10, I went to Starbucks. It was Dunkin' to start, and then it became Starbucks. Although I heard a rumor, wasn't there a director at some point wanted to like rip out the coffee stands, right? I don't know which one.
That was our friend Rob Dannenberg wanted to do that. He thought that they were
okay.
Yeah.
Get rid of them. But yeah, no, I became a Starbucks man as it went on, and there were plenty of my analyst friends who probably spent good portions of their days kind of like just milling around the Starbucks, right? Or having various like ostensible work chats in the cafeteria or at the Starbucks that were not, So
I think that's why he wanted to rip them out, because
yeah,
people
exactly. It was distracting.
Well, let's talk about you for a second. I mean, really, you have become quite popular, both for your books, which are get high praise, but also this podcast, which is newer. So, which do you like better nowadays, the writing or the podcasting?
Well, that's hard. I mean, I enjoy both of them. I think the writing is the central thing that I don't know. I will never stop writing, and I hope the podcast never stops. But kind of the central piece of all of it's the books. But Gordon and I are having a ton of fun on the podcast, and it's a good, I see it as very like symbiotic with the writing, because it's an opportunity to go into spy stories that I know something about, and then actually go deep and do the research to come up with kind of, the arc for a 2 or a 4 or 6-part series, and learn a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't otherwise know. And then frankly, try to find ways to work some of that material into books if I can, or kind of take ideas and then, put them into a novel. I mean, most of the books I'm writing, they're fiction, right? So it's, there are elements of those stories that are not totally authentic to the way, human intelligence operations are run, as I'm sure you two would both attest. But finding things that are real in the real world of what's happened in the espionage business or in spy stories, and kind of using that as grounding for characters or for situations in my books is, I'm trying to be as authentic as possible. And so kind of going into real stuff and finding interesting characters or situations is really fruitful. So I think the two things really work well together.
Yeah. Well, fiction and John's war stories are pretty much the same thing anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, there I was, just me and Igor. So I
listen to him.
Yeah, true. I'm going to endeavor to say something good about analysts, and
okay.
I want to
get hard for you.
I want to go down this rabbit hole, and this gets into conspiracies and conspiracy theories. And so, like, one of the and there's lots of them out there, but one of the bigger ones is Iraq WMD, and it's something that I have an indirect insight into, and I imagine also you indirect through hearsay and so forth, but my sense was, it is billed as, and I'm permission to swear because this is a big one, this is like a huge agency fuck up.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'm not going to shy away from that, but I think the real, for me in any case, the real conspiracy here is that the Bush administration basically had decided to go to war, and they built their own, with Doug Fife, they built their own intelligence service in the Pentagon for a little while, for 2 years, to basically prove that case and to throw out any evidence that didn't support it. And then, of course, they went down the road of, Saddam and Al-Qaeda were very close, which was completely untrue. And then they said that, they hooked into a whole host of scammers that claimed that Saddam had this, curveball and all the rest of this. And my understanding is that the analysts who wouldn't go along with this were systematically weeded out, sort of pushed off to the side or demoted or asked to move off. And that the analysts at the end said, well, the evidence that we have indicates that they likely do. There was sort of probability. I don't remember, it was high, medium, low. And the White House said that's not good enough. And George Tenet, who I think highly of, caved, is my understanding. And he said, look, it's yes or no. There's no maybes here. We're going to war. Say yes or no, and you better be friggin' yes, right? And so they did. They said yes. And so the agency, through a conspiracy, has been stuck with, this has been pinned to us as is one of our great failures. And I think it's, the analysts are sort of at the center of this, the pressure's on them. So I was wondering, from where you sit, from what you heard, you weren't involved in this, what's your sense of pressure on analysts? And this goes today in this administration to all sorts of things like, where COVID came from and so forth. So I was wondering if you could go into that just a little bit, pressures.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's my understanding as well of the Iraq WMD story, is that it is in some sense a story about analytic failure, because at the time there wasn't, I actually don't think that there were embedded across the DI. There weren't sort of the confidence statements and all these kind of other, and frankly, a lot of the clarity around how good or bad or fragmentary or otherwise the sourcing was, like those were not as consistently embedded in the assessments. And so it was easier in some ways, I think, to sort of hand wave maybe, or for consumers of the intel to take away different stories from what they were reading. And a lot of the changes made, like just as I was joining, were to try to like systematize the way that we communicated intel assessments, and to be very clear about what we knew and what we didn't know and things like that. But I think that the arc of the story you told on Iraq WMD, I think that's a particularly egregious example of the politics kind of dipping in and dictating or really influencing what the CIA puts down on paper. I think the politicization of analysis, though, I think it's usually, I mean, it's rarely that easy, I think, to sort of go back and say that's exactly what happened. I think Iraq WMD, because I mean, my understanding is that sometimes like there were NSC or Pentagon or White House officials who would literally, I mean, it came out to Langley on multiple occasions to like basically sit with the analysts, right?
And yell at them, right?
And like, so, I mean, that's a lot of pressure, right? And to your point, like if the decision's already been made to do this, to go to war, it, I guess, becomes more of a political question for, the director for the 7th floor to figure out how do you not lose the trust of the White House, right? If they've already made the decision. But yeah, I mean, the politicization pressure and sort of, I guess the risk is real, and it is really, I think, hard to I mean, it shouldn't be hard for the like line analysts to navigate, because they're the ones that are looking at the stuff, and ideally they're being backed up the chain by people who have an interest in like, I mean,
truth,
maybe corny, but like, yeah, speaking the truth regardless of what the politics are. But there's really many different ways that the analysis can get politicized at different parts of the chain. A lot of different people are touching it. And there's also like, I mean, frankly, stuff could get politicized by what's not written or what's not reported into the White House or what doesn't get read in the PDB. So
PDB is the President's Daily Brief.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So it's really subtle, I think, because frankly, the politicization could start with, someone who's editing one of those PDBs just kind of softening some stuff a little bit, or saying, is this really a moderate confidence judgment? This seems more like a low confidence judgment to me based on this definition. And that's more art than science. And if something's a low confidence judgment, then maybe it's not worth actually briefing to the president, period. And so it never makes it into any kind of higher level conversation down in the Oval. So there's lots of different ways. I mean, frankly, I'd be curious for your guys' thoughts on this. On the collection side, I'd imagine there's plenty of ways that someone on the 7th floor in the DDO shop could say, on these 3 or 4 topics, like I want to see the stuff before it gets dissemmed, and you could decide for any reason you kind of cook up, maybe we don't dissemb this kind of thing, and because it's going to set off fireworks downtown, and maybe I make up some stuff about how the sourcing's bogus or whatever in order to justify it. So there's a lot of different ways you could play around with it. I think throughout the chain, right?
I think it's important to discuss what dissemb means, right? People that may not realize this. So people like John and I, we would collect the information from a source, just putatively get a human source. He gives us the information. We don't like hand it to the president. We actually hand it to a reports officer, a CMO, And they take the information, decide how it's written up. Then it goes to headquarters where they look at it again, and then they disseminate to whomever needs it, whoever's in need to know. So to the analysts. And there's always a danger that if that raw disseminated report goes directly to the White House and it's wrong, or if it's slanted, then you've got other problems. But so that's the way it should go. But there's lots of places to slip twixt the, twixt the spoon in the lip, right? I mean, and a lot of ways to influence it. So
yeah, if you go back to the WMD, Iraq WMD problem, a lot of people have gone back after the analysts for making a bad call there, but frankly, there was no good collection then either. So it was a real intelligence failure. We had no good sources, really.
Yeah.
We had a White House that decided they needed to go to war, and we had no Americans living in the country. We had no good sources, and the analysts were being pressured to come up with an analytic judgment. And I think they tried to use what would be logical. Well, he had WMD before, and he tried to hide it, so he must be doing so again. And so it was a real problem. And I think we've seen even more recently. You talked about it in one of your podcasts recently about the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. It seems in that case, we actually had good collection. We had some sort of source or sources that were telling us that Putin was about to invade. But some of the analysis clearly was wrong, because we had information Putin was going to invade, but then the decision was what's going to happen next. And essentially our analysts in some fashion must have told the White House, well, Ukraine's going to lose quickly, and so you better get Zelensky out of there. And that's not what happened. Someone had to make a decision on how were the Ukrainians willing to fight. And we obviously did not have good intelligence on that, either collection or analysis.
Yeah.
And David, I was wondering if you could also comment too on, so you were involved a lot with Syria. That's reflected in your book. You were there for Prague Spring, dates me, for the Arab Spring. It's like, go doom check. Yeah. So many different springs to keep checking. And so, people tend to think in conspiratorial thinking that the agency is omnipotent, omnivorous, which is why I'm a DO guy, right? Because I don't always know what these words mean. But so you were there for,
or how to say it, omnipotent. Omnipotent.
Omnipotent, right.
Yeah. Omnipotent.
Potent. In any case,
sorry.
When things surprise us, so like the Arab Spring, people tend to think that the agency is involved in prophesying, that you guys have a crystal ball. So I was wondering if you could give us your sense as an analyst of what we could know about the Arab Spring, right? A fruit seller gets slapped and the world falls apart. And then more recently is like when Assad fell, like everybody was like, holy shit, right? I mean, nobody predicted it. They predicted increased pressure. So I was just wondering if you could give folks a sense of like how you guys are just as much at sea as the rest of us, right? And it's not a conspiracy to hide, or that we've got all this information. Well, all this information. We have all this power that people assume we have.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way I would maybe frame it is, I think making a call on sort of the eruption of mass sort of popular uprising in the Middle East is a mystery. It is a sort of mass psychological phenomenon that is inherently unpredictable, and actually nobody is capable of predicting it. Whereas, does Saddam possess chemical, biological weapons, whatever, is a secret. We in theory could have collected information that would have, sort of proved or disproved whether or not that's true. Which is why I think, I would say, I mean, to your point, John, I'd never thought about WMD actually as a DO failure, a collection failure, but I that's, that's also a piece of it. The whole kind of chain failed because the analysts, we didn't have good information. And then the analysts sort of, through pressure and otherwise, messed up the call. But that is I think an intelligence failure involves like, are there secrets to collect that should have been collected, or analysis that should have been conducted given the available information that wasn't, right? Whereas I think the, predicting Syria it's not possible. Like, and so we certainly did not have a crystal ball. And most of what the country analysts were doing in those, late 2010, early 2011 months were either writing pieces that explained sort of what are the hurdles to a protest movement or to an insurgency or a civil war, like what has to be overcome to get there. So said differently, like what would you have to believe for this to happen? Or writing scenarios that lay out sort of, 3 or 4 worlds or paths you could travel down, should the sort of security apparatus and general kind of pillars of stability in a given country start to crumble. And none of us had any, I mean, I had, friends who were working on other, Middle East accounts at that point in time who were literally essentially writing pieces that had them in draft form that were like, this is why it's not going to happen here. And then the protest movement would start and they would be like, well, delete these, So like, it's just, you can't, no one saw that stuff coming, right? I mean, no more than like nobody saw the sort of, collapse of communism across Eastern Europe happening so quickly in 89 either, right? So it's not predictable, I think, those kind of mass events.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, I went to West Berlin in in April of '89, and 5 months later, it all fell apart. I mean, the wall came down. Coincidence? I think.
Fine analysis right there.
In my mind, no. But I back to WMD, just because I was sort of involved in this. It was also a process issue. So there was this source called Curveball. Now, Curveball was only met, but he was the main source. Never do things on single source. He was the main source that told us with great confidence and specificity about the state of the WMD programs. And Curveball was living in Munich at the time, and German station, and I've got a pretty good view into this, talked to the Germans about him because he refused to meet the CIA, but he did talk to the German intelligence source. And he said, I won't meet the CIA, but you can give their information to them, to U.S. intelligence. I think the station took a look at his stuff and said, we can't verify any of this. None of this makes, and maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it's like, we can't verify it. So it's really not any good. And then what happened is the military came in and they said, well, we'll do it. Right. But they didn't tell the station. So all that reporting that went out through the U.S. military. And we in the station and our analysts were getting it, but we didn't know where it was coming from. Right. I mean, we didn't have a need to know that it was coming out of Munich. We didn't have a know. And it only sort of at the very end did we solve that. Yeah, it was like
a big
whoa,
circular reference.
Oh, yeah. This is that same guy.
This is the same guy. And I think it's been in the press that the station chief actually wrote and said, I hope this isn't the case. And Tyler Drumhiller famously, again, according to the media, went and said, I hope you're not basing it on this guy in Munich, on Curveball. And by then it was sort of too late. But the process, the military, and they talk to each other, but they didn't talk about sourcing to each other, right? So it gets, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but yeah, it was also a process issue.
For sure. And I mean, the way I remember this kind of rolling downhill to me as an analyst when I joined a few years after this was being really, really, really explicit when you're writing a finished, intelligence product. Like you're not actually, you're not giving obviously the name of the source. You're not describing where they work, but like much more extensive descriptions of how much confidence we have in the source and whether they actually have, good access and all of that. Like, have they been vetted? So there was a lot more information that got included post like 03, 04, 05.
That's right.
If you go back and read stuff that was written in 01 or, 02, like oftentimes the sourcing statements were very thin.
Trust me, dude. That was the sourcing statement. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, kind of. Yeah. That's the way it read. Yeah.
Just a quick, I don't want to keep this too boring on policy stuff, but to go back to Syria, I think Syria is a big deal. Like there was environmental concerns and things that led to, lots of people leaving Syria, which led to problems in Europe and political problems that related to immigration and things that put pressure on political leaders. What do you think is happening now? Do you think this is a policy question, not an intelligence question? Do you think we are handling it well? We have a new leader in Syria, and it sounds to me like, the administration wants to sort of blow him off. And I worry that more problems in Syria are a potential problem for outside of Syria as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm weirdly, as an analyst, I'm a natural pessimist, and I think Syria for like 15 years has given me plenty of reasons to be pessimistic about pretty much everything. A lot of reasons to continue to be pessimistic, although strangely enough, at this point, I'm sort of cautiously hopeful or optimistic about the future. I mean, and it's not to say that I think it's possible that we get like a flowering Jeffersonian democracy in Syria. That seems unlikely, but I think it's also very possible, if not even likely, that we get a better outcome than Assad by a wide margin. In terms
low
of
bar, though, frankly,
it is a low bar, but I think it's it's possible that we end up with a Syria that is at least not sort of actively creating massive problems for all of its neighbors, and is maybe hopefully in the future politically more stable and also more open, right, than the regime Assad ran, and frankly managing its repressive apparatus on a much less sort of industrial horrific scale, right? I mean, that seems like we're going to cross that we will cross that bar for sure, right? This is going to be a far less repressive regime than the one Assad ran. That said, I mean, where to start with the problems, and frankly, even though we still have troops in the Northeast, I think maybe about 900 or so, that are there supporting our comrades in the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces. I don't think this administration has any. I mean, do they have a Syria policy or an interest in developing one? I mean, and if so, what would it even be? I think this is kind of one of those pockets of the world that's just probably not going to be getting a lot of interest from Trump 2.0.
But it will be getting a lot of interest from Israel and Turkey and others.
We'll be getting a lot of interest from Israel and Turkey, and I think they're the two major geopolitical winners here. I read that the Israeli Air Force, in the days after Assad fled, flew more air sorties over Syria than they had in any day in any conflict since 1967. Like they essentially destroyed most of Syria's military capacity in like about 72 hours. And the Turks, are probably the group with the most influence, both in the north and then with the new crew in Damascus. So big winners. Iran, us, not so much. So we'll see.
We just need an independent Kurdistan. That'll fix it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I've got an idea for the Middle East. I do feel bad for. It's like the Kurds. It's just the constant.
No, they get screwed. Yeah.
It every time. Like every time at one of these conflicts ends, it's the Kurds end up getting screwed. So it's really tragic.
Yeah. So it's churlish of John and I to engage in a contretemps with you on the fact that you can't help it that you're an analyst, but I want to go at you from a whole nother aspect with conspiracy.
There's no word another.
Whole different kind of thing. So as a writer, as an author, you're and we sort of dabble in Hollywood as well. Everybody wants a conspiracy in their plot, right? They're replete with conspiracy theories. Do you find, as do we to a certain extent, that the outside of maybe the Beltway, some people who are like foreign policy wonks, that it's hard to keep like fictional conspiracy theories and what the CIA and what the intelligence community and what the U.S. government actually is and can do, like the deep state? Do you find that, you field questions from people where they're not quite sure of where the line is between like a fun fictional conspiracy and books or a movie or the way shit really works? And how do you resolve that?
So I continue to be surprised, although I shouldn't be, at just how little most people know about the way, the intelligence
the sausage is made,
the CIA more particularly works. I mean, most people, even, very smart, well-read people, just don't have an understanding of the way it functions. And I think almost all of the primary source material, I should use scare quotes around that, for people's perceptions come from Hollywood. They come from spy films and TV shows and spy novels, right? That's
actually, I don't think the president of the United States understands how it functions. Just to be clear.
Yeah, and he probably doesn't really. I mean, my understanding, by the way, I didn't realize this. This is not actually a tangent, although it'll sound like it. That the CIA writes like a chapter in this book that they put out every presidential transition about the transition for the briefings and all of that to kind of get the new POTUS in office. And the chapter in the book for Trump, the first administration, because they haven't done the second one yet, was called Donald J. Trump: A Unique Challenge. That was literally the title of the chapter. And it did confirm that he's not. I don't think he's not really a PDB reader kind of guy. Let's put it that way. So yeah, I don't think most people really understand the way it works. That is, by the way, the reason why I think there continues to be a tremendous demand for spy-related, espionage-related content, because people don't. It's sort of secretive, and if you, as a reader or watcher of spy content, feel as though you're being led into a secret world, there's something interesting and intriguing about that. And I mean, I generally try to write things to be as authentic as possible, but you sort of get to a point in every story where something has to happen for the demands of the story that are not the way it actually happens. And
got to be a mole, right?
Yeah, there's somebody, the director's working for the Russians, there's got to be something kind of, big, and that sets the stakes for the whole story. And that tends to break the rules of the way things actually work. And so I think as a writer, I'm generally trying to create enough of a sort of foundation in the novel that you, as the reader, are willing to take those leaps, or maybe are just so kind of lulled into the world of the story that you don't even know that, at 3 or 4 points along the way, I'm positing a scenario that, is extremely, unlikely to happen. Although I would say what I'm generally also trying to do, and you talked about conspiracies, and I think I'm trying to create a scenario in the novels that is highly improbable, but in the world of the novel and the characters of the novel and the rules of the novel, it's not implausible, right? So the story should be highly, like, you read it and you'd be like, this never happens. But if you dip into the world of the book,
it's internally consistent.
It's internally exactly.
Right. So what you're saying, though, is to put words in your mouth is what people need to do is listen to this podcast and your podcast more often to understand the way things really work. Right.
Well, and that is the wild thing for me, is if you really want to learn how these places work, there actually is material out there available to you. You can listen to this podcast.
Lots of it.
You can listen to my podcast. You can go out there and get the memoirs of any number of CIA officers who have written actual books about the way the place really functions and read it. It's not that there's some dearth of material. It's that very few people actually know where to look, or frankly are probably not even maybe that interested in the reality of it. They just, they want the, the spy-tainment.
To go then to the stories and the content, you've now had a number of episodes with your new podcast, which is very popular and getting wide attention and good praise. Do you have some favorite stories? You guys have covered Edward Snowden. You've covered the Israeli killing of nuclear scientists. You've covered MK Ultra and tests,
real
drug
conspiracy.
Tests inside the CIA. Klaus Fuchs and the atomic program. Spies inside of Russia. A number of other things. Do you have any sort of favorites or anything you'd like to aim people towards?
Yeah, so I would point people toward the Snowden series that we just kind of dropped recently. That one was really interesting for me because I was at the agency when that happened, and of course not involved in it in any way, but had some awareness of sort of how it had gone down, but had never, spent days researching it and talking about it with Gordon. So like getting into that story was really, really interesting and confirmed all of my preconceived biases about Ed Snowden. Also, I would say I was not, my opinion of the man was not changed. So that was a really fun one. The other one that I've really enjoyed doing was there was a spy ring of Bulgarians who were operating in
the Minions.
The Minions, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, let me just add one thing about that one, which you do in all of your episodes, but that especially is it's impressive how you keep Gordon off balance at all times with good lowbrow U.S. cultural references.
That's right.
And occasionally making fun of the British themselves, which is I find very impressive.
Yeah, I do aim to destabilize Gordon Carrera whenever possible, and I hope to keep him on his toes. He can't get too comfortable. But I love the Minions one because my kids, I've got 3 kids, and they are avid watchers of the Despicable Me franchise and the Minions, and I had a legitimate work reason to rewatch those movies and to go deep into like internet research on all the various like spy tech in the Minions. But that story was great because the thing that I think has been most fun on the podcast is finding stories that do have a legitimate spy story at the heart of whatever the tale is, but are also sort of darkly comedic at the same time. And it seems like anytime you're dealing with like Russian espionage in Europe, we hit that kind of like nexus of there's bizarre characters and they're doing things that are also, if they succeed, potentially very damaging or lethal and awful and murderous and all this kind of stuff. So it's this weird package that I think makes those stories really, really fun for me to research. And they're really, I mean, they can be sad too, but it's the kind of mixture of all of that makes them appealing.
Well, I found it very disappointing in your research on the Minions that you didn't include me in it. You missed that part. Yeah, I see by the gobsmacked.
That's an uncaring look is what that is.
the look of gobsmackedness on your face.
I am gobsmacked because I have no idea where this is going.
So yeah. It's our world, the world of like DI folks and DO folks is pretty limited sometimes, right? We keep bumping into each other. But after I retired, one of the first sort of job offers I got, and I won't go into detail here, but I was brought out to London. This is after I'd retired, and someone tried to hire me to use my operator skills, which of course we're not really security guys, but to basically investigate the FT, because the guy was saying that the FT is a bad actor.
It's the Financial Times.
The Financial Times, and that what I was supposed to investigate them for, and the journalists I was supposed to go after were the ones who were looking into Wirecard, right? And Masalek, right? The Austrian guy.
Yes.
And so I was supposed to come save them. And it was outlined to me, that the journalists are up to no good. They're being hired by a bad actor to wreck investments. And they went through all this. And I thought, it sounds like the Financial Times is onto this, right? This Jan Marsalek is like, he sounds like a bad guy. And then of course he runs off to Moscow and he hires the Minions, right? So
right.
I have a small little teeny slice of
but if you had done it, you could have become rich and then you would be part of the Trump administration.
Probably. Yeah, but that's true too.
Wait, so who do you know, maybe you can't say, but I mean, who is hiring you to do that?
I could tell you. I could tell you offline, but yes, someone tried to hire me to basically do opposition research to undermine stories that were undermining Wirecard. And the other part you didn't have in there, which I really love, was that it wasn't really your focus. Your focus was on the Minions, but Wirecard, the German BND, was using this to pay their agents and so the Russians were controlling the payment mechanism to Germany's most secret, their version of Knox, how they finance them, and all their agents around the world. So when you're chief of station in Berlin and the Germans are like, hey, let's work together. You're like,
So you're saying the Germans screwed up Iraq WMD and then later screwed up everything else.
And they didn't win. And they lost 2 world wars. Yeah, I'm just saying, it's...
it all leads back to Berlin.
It all does.
That's bad. Yeah. That's bad. Yeah.
But it's a small world. It's a small world in our,
It is. And that's why that the Jan Marsalic character is like a great, I mean, he's just, it's when you read it out loud,
he's got to be in your book.
He actually did. It's insane. I mean, it's the kind of character where if I had written that in a novel, my editor would have been like, this is ridiculous. This isn't realistic. And it's
and David, you seem like you've got some decent sort of self-confidence. I don't want to deflate it.
Who knows where he's going with this? There it goes.
But I got to say, your German accent in your podcast, and people have to say, it was really more Colonel Klink than...
No, I know.
It was great. Actually, I loved it. It was great.
I'm so bad at the accents. I can't.
Really it was very good. Yeah, it was excellent. I was
when Jerry does his German accent, like he speaks almost like native German. It's obnoxious, sort of like when people had the Latin accent and they go like Venezuela. He does the same kind of thing with the German, and it makes you want to punch him.
Berlin, yeah.
You're saying Colonel Klink isn't authentic, sort of.
Well, he was authentic. He was a German Jew. Yeah,
he might be too young to have watched Hogan's Heroes.
I watched Hogan's Heroes.
Yeah, his father was a conductor, Klempner. Yeah, it was like his father was a famous orchestra conductor.
Yes, he was.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
anyway.
I need to improve. Yeah, the accents they'll come with time.
It was great. It was great. You had Gordon on the back feet with that. That was a good one. Yeah. So, what is your favorite conspiracy theory on CIA that either gets thrown at you, you find yourself defending, or you're wondering yourself, like, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot?
Mm-hmm.
And please don't let it be Kennedy or aliens, right? I mean,
no. I mean, so the one that I get pretty frequently nowadays, and it's a mixture of some of the people who bring this forward are hostile, and then others are just curious. But it is the deep state, and it's a fun one because it's kind of it's extremely vague, and so it kind of becomes anything that the sort of the holder of this worldview wants it to become, right? And I really try to understand every time what they're talking about, like what the allegation is, but it comes down to some unspecified cabal of senior CIA officials who are working with the FBI to undermine American
that should kill it right there,
right? Yeah,
exactly. CIA guys working with the FBI.
Stop you right there. It's not going to work like that. They hate each other. But that's the one I get the most. That's probably the most frequent one that I get in some way, shape, or form. The other one that comes up a lot are someone will just say Hunter Biden laptop and the letter and all of that. Like that's another one that'll come up. And again, it's very hard to sort of walk the person through to like what's really going on. But that's another one that comes up.
But on
really
the deep
frequently.
State thing, I often wonder, like, if you had time to walk people through this, like, don't you want a deep state in a certain sense? What you're saying is you have a professional group of experts in an area who don't always agree with what the politicians tell them. So I think these people are saying, hey, the first time President Trump was in power, all of these bureaucrats didn't just automatically agree and support everything he said. Instead, they were doing what they were supposed to do. They would come and say, sir, that actually is against the law. Or if you do that, China's going to retaliate. You might not want to. And so, yes, it probably, for a president who didn't understand how power works, it probably was frustrating to him. But if you get rid of that and don't have expertise or people who actually try to tell you what really is going on, you've created a far bigger problem for that president, because he's going to walk right into the muck.
Because coming full circle, with Rock WMD, if we had a better deep state, they would have said, sir, we don't have absolute evidence. We don't have proof of WMD. We have conjecture and hypothesis, right? Go to war on that if you want, but you can't go saying it is. You can only say maybe.
The only, like, I think it's probably right, because I think all of that is true. To me, it's more symptomatic that conspiracy theory is more symptomatic of just the general sort of collapse of trust in the institutions of our state and our media and our civic life. And so the CIA is like not immune to that. And so it's like, it's weird because Iraq WMD has in some way contributed to that, because people go back and say, oh, you guys, you screwed this up and we went to war and, we spent $1 trillion and, a whole bunch of people died and we got nothing. But the solution to that would be to have a better intelligence service, not to just undermine the one that we have now right. even further. And I don't think that circle gets squared. I also just think that the immense secrecy makes it a lot harder to, there is just, and this is not a super aha moment, but it's, obviously in an open society and in a democracy, there's an incredible amount of tension with the secrecy that the CIA needs to operate. And we're inherently distrustful of anything that happens in secret in this country.
But you say trust has collapsed, so it's fallen out of a window like a Russian oligarch. But did it fall or was it pushed? Because you've got people at the typical at the epicenter center or at the very acme of U.S. power who are still talking about the deep state. They are the deep state, right? So is it? It seems to me that there isn't a conspiracy in some way, shape, or form, depending on that definition, to actually push the narrative that there is a deep state, right? And we could talk about the whole other episode as to why, but I'm not sure that it's collapsed. I think that it's been monetized, and there's a
Yeah, how long can you be in charge of it and keep saying that it exists?
It's very Trumpian to kind of have the, because he does kind of talk out of both sides of his mouth on the intelligence community, right? For one of the episodes that we did on kind of intel and politics, and we did the Halloween massacre story as part of that, when Stan Turner, did a bunch of cuts back in the late 70s, primarily in the DO and the director of operations. And like, when you go back and you really read like what Trump has said about the IC, you get a lot of stuff where he is like, man, you guys are the best and I love you and I love what you're doing. And then you get a lot of other stuff that's like, at the same time, there's this deep state that exists inside the FBI and the CIA, and we need to kind of root it out. And he'll kind of talk about both of those things in the same conversations, in the same press conferences, right? And when he went out to Langley on day one of his first administration, you read the transcript of that speech, which is insane. And he says all of that stuff multiple times. And so he's kind of, I think he's just, it's kind of contradictory. I think he's very instinctive. And I think he realizes that at maybe some basic level, there's some capabilities and some cool shit inside the intelligence community that could be really beneficial to him, and probably some people in there that want to help him. And then at the same time, you get irritating things like when Russia House and the Russia analysts are putting stuff out that says, hey, we're not saying that the Russians got you elected. We're saying the Russians wanted you to win. And, he's not, there's no difference. There's no distinction in his mind between those things. And I think that more than anything else, probably, and I think you guys more about the story than I do, but that more than anything else, I think in his mind was like, oh, there's like enemies or people who wish me ill inside, CIA, who are putting these assessments together, letting them get out. Like, I don't want that. And it kind of, the relationship, I think, from there really has been rocky, right. Hasn't it?
Well, the internal contradiction just today that came out is you've got RFK Jr. apparently yesterday said that he was asked about chemtrails, right? The U.S. government secretly putting out poisons into the air to whatever it is to make people infertile or to kill specific nationalities. And instead of saying it's not true because he's in charge now, he said, well, my department doesn't do that. And then he basically said, you have to talk to Pete Hegseth about that, right? He blamed DARPA and said, well, that's the real deep state that's doing this, right? So that even when they're in charge, they still are like the Tweed ring pointing at each other. They can't just say,
yeah, the CIA killed my father. And so they get in and say, well, put out all the material. So they put out all the material. And then it's just like, oh, okay, let's move on to the next thing. There's like,
yeah. No. And I think the thing for me that is just kind of a basic starting point is like, we want the people in our country who are making the decisions to have better information about other countries than those countries do about us. And so if you start from that premise, which I think most people would agree with, you need an effective foreign intelligence service to do that. You need one. Like, you could argue about what form it takes. You could argue about how the whole thing's organized bureaucratically, but like, we should be collecting information on other big countries like Russia and China and Iran and North Korea that potentially wish us ill, right? And you'd want the president to have the best possible information about what those countries are up to. And that's what the CIA does, So it's hard for me to, if someone can't walk to that point in the conversation, it's like, we're not living on the same planet.
So, David, let me ask you about yourself. So, when you supposedly left CIA, of course, you didn't.
We're all still in.
You're still in the deep state, joining Operation Mockingbird to write these novels to to influence people.
Exactly.
So, did you enjoy your time in the agency, and why'd you decide to leave? And how does Hollywood compare to like the intelligence community? Because we're finding Hollywood to be like way more screwed up than we ever were. But I'm sorry.
Well, the agency was great because I got to be at briefings with guys like you who tell me how smart I was.
Yeah, good try.
How badly my analytic judgments were needed to support this critical operation. I really enjoyed my time at the CIA. I think, as someone who joined really young and who wanted to learn how the world worked and get the opportunity to travel and see the world outside of Minnesota, I really enjoyed it, and I found the problems I was working on there to be really endlessly fascinating. And it felt, even though there were plenty of times where I feel like we would write things and basically, you'd get the feedback of like read with interest, which generally meant they looked at the piece of paper that it was on. That was a classic one. Like, it was read with interest. And then you'd write that up in your annual assessment. You'd be like, I wrote 10 PDBs that were read with interest this year. It did feel in some way like, I felt like I could connect some line from like, I'm working on this topic to like, then it's getting to people who are actually making decisions, and you hope in some way, shape, or form, something you've written somewhere has made some difference in the way policy is made. And so I really loved it. And I honestly, maybe kind of cheesy to say, but, working with a bunch of really smart people who are also like dedicated to the mission of the CIA was, like an experience I wouldn't trade for anything. I would say that, I have a little bit more creative freedom now when I'm writing novels. So I'm not sending things through 9 layers of review. And, there's definitely a part of me that is grateful, given how chaotic things seem in DC these days, to not be in one of those chairs at this point. But,
you still go through the PRB, yes?
Still go through everything. Still goes through the PRB.
Publication Review Board.
Yep. Yeah. And, I think I honestly have probably learned more about the actual CIA itself now that I'm outside and like writing stories about it and having conversations with guys like you about, not the substance of this or that thing at Syria, but about like, what's the job like? What's the place like? All that. So I've gotten a kind of newfound appreciation for the place. And obviously it's got a lot of warts too, but I think it's a really important institution and a really fascinating one. And so it's been interesting to write about it from the outside.
So that leads me to perhaps our last question. When I keep you too long, can you tell us about your next book, and are we in it?
Yeah, we gotta
central figures, obviously.
That's right.
Yeah.
Central figures. John and Jerry. I made you both
Jerry
analysts.
and John, please.
Jerry and John. You're a team of analysts who get in the first pages, get a call horribly wrong and are the rest of the
That's
story
okay, I'll take it.
The rest of the story is the intrepid case officer David who really solves the problem. I have enjoyed, interestingly, because most of the protagonists of the book are case officers, because if you wrote an analyst protagonist, it would actually be very hard to make that book work. I've taken a lot of pot shots at the analyst, and I think I need to start taking more at the case officers.
That's fine.
Frankly,
it's shooting fish in a barrel. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, we can help you with that.
It really is. So the next one, which is out here in the States in September 30th, is called The Persian, and it is a Israel-Iran story. I basically looked at all the different crazy things that the Israelis have done in Iran over the past 15 plus years, and tried to imagine what it might look like if the Iranians built a similar capability, not to the same level, but built a similar capability in Israel and started to kill Israeli security officials and intelligence officers, and the Israelis kind of going back at them to try to figure out what's going on. So it's a war of assassinations between both the Israelis and the Iranians, and it was a very interesting book to write because of so much of the kind of Israel-Iran shadow war kind of bleeding out into the open while I was actually writing it. And another one of those stories where so many of the Israeli operations were so insane that it was oftentimes just the best scenario to sort of change a few things and basically use what the Israelis had already done as plot points, because so much of the stuff was so bonkers.
You mean like a satellite operated AI enabled machine gun?
Right. Or kidnapping the head of the Quds Force's like external kind of lethal operations unit and interrogating him in Iran before dumping him back out on the street and then taking all the footage and leaking it to journalists. So, it's just like crazy stuff. The other great story, which has been well documented, is when they broke into the archive where the Iranians had kept all of their files on the nuke program, and they basically broke into all these safes and put everything on trucks and then just drove it out of the country. So, yeah,
there's a heist.
Pretty wild stuff.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading that. Maybe you can sign our books when the time comes. Maybe we'll have you on to talk about the book itself. But
that'd be great. Yeah,
David, thanks for meeting us. Anybody who is listening to this should definitely be listening to The Rest is Classified, David's podcast.
Listen to us first, though, and then
listen to this.
It's a lot funnier.
I don't know if I can support that, Jerry.
Gordon's not as funny as we are.
That's true.
You're a little serious,
he's got that
kind of thing.
He's got that accent thing going.
But again, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it, and you're one of our favorite guys to read and listen to. So thanks.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate you inviting an analyst to come on this program. So got down and need to.